The first chapter here, the first section, is all about adab al-akl, eating. It's about table manners. It's about hosting people, etc. And, just take some notes because there's a lot of little details to this. This is not a book that's filled with a bunch of hadith. It's not presented in the fashion of, here's the action and here's the evidence, right? This is something that's meant to be concise, so the evidence, a lot of it has been stripped away from the text. And the evidence in Islam, by the way, is not simply Quran and Sunnah, the ayat and the hadith, but there are other things like scholarly consensus among the early generations where they all agreed on something. Or there's things that scholars conclude that are like practical or tried and true things that they've come across. Or there's an illah, there's like some reason or cause to do a thing or not to do a thing. So do keep that in mind when you hear some of these things. So he says that the manners of eating, there are manners that are before eating, there are manners that you have to observe while you eat, and then there are manners that you observe after you're finished. He said, the first category is to wash your hands before you eat, as was mentioned in a hadith, because typically there's going to be some germs or some dirt on them. And then you put the food down on a sufra, which is like a table mat, if you will. And this is placed on the ground, which is more likely the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, as opposed to putting it up on a table, which is typical of how we eat today. This is also closer to being modest and humble, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he ate on the ground. And then you sit there on that mat, and you prop up your right foot, and you kind of sit on your left. So it's almost as if you bring your right foot up in this manner, and then you sit much like you would in prayer on your left, and that's how you sit. That's considered the good manners in sitting at the dinner mat, if you will. And then when you begin to eat, of course, you need an intention. Intention is important. And you should intend by eating to strengthen yourself to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Strengthen yourself, right? He says, and يَتَقَوَّى عَلَى طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ, that you're going to eat in order to find the sustenance that you need to continue living a life of obedience and worship. And this way, while you're eating, you're in the service of Allah. And this is how the intention can make your habits ritualistic or worship. And this is a principle in Islam that with the power of intention, you can change habits into acts of worship. Just like with the lack of an intention, you can change acts of worship into habits. Whether it's a prayer or fasting Ramadan, if it's without a pure intention, then it'd be just simply habitual. So that's something. And your intention here in eating is not simply to enjoy the provisions, the favor of Allah, not simply just enjoy what you have. You can certainly do that for the foodies that are out there. You can certainly enjoy the provision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His favor upon you, but don't forget to include that in your intention that you're going to consume this so that you can find the strength and sustenance needed to continue. He says a sign of the validity of this intention is that you're satisfied with little. You're satisfied with simple foods and simple things, and you don't overindulge in them, right? You don't overindulge. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that there's not a worse vessel filled by Adam other than his own stomach, right? He says it's sufficient for the son of Adam to eat food which will keep him upright, enough to keep him upright and functioning. And if he has no escape from eating a lot, don't be angry. Then a third for food, a third for drink, and a third for air. Listen carefully. فَإِنْ كَانَ لَا مَحَالَةَ. He says, if there's absolutely no way out, no escape from overdoing it, then overdoing it is considered a third, and a third. doesn't mean overdoing it. Look, the reason I'm saying that is because typically we think the standard is to eat a third, to drink a third, and then to leave a third empty. I think that's kind of like the standard. Like, I'm filling up the tank, and that's my max. No, that's it. But typically what it should be is that you eat enough to satisfy your basic need for sustenance. He says also from the essentials, if you will, of this intention is that you don't go reaching for food unless you're actually hungry. It's not something that you do to pass the time or to entertain yourself with or to cope with the trials of life, but you don't extend your hand to food unless you're hungry. And you don't continue to extend your hand to food when you've become full. You should stop eating before you're actually full. And he says here, if you're able to do this, then it's likely that you will not have to see a doctor. Keeping it 100?
That's what the kids say nowadays, right?
100. Yeah, I've dealt with that. Right, so here you can see even the scholars, they something that's not new science, it's not new medicine. Diet is a huge thing in your health, and if you can manage well, then you're probably less likely to frequent the doctor's office. And I don't want to take any business away from you guys here. There's plenty of sick people. Also from that essentials of that intention, meaning the intention to use food as a means to worshiping Allah, is that you're happy with whatever is available. You're happy with Allah's provision. Whatever you have, you're satisfied with that. And you don't look down on what's considered to be a little. You don't get disappointed when you see just a meager amount of things. And I will remind you of that when Ramadan rolls around and it's time for iftar. You should be happy with whatever's there. Another one of these essentials here is that you do your best to increase the amount of people that are with you when you eat, meaning that you share what you have. Even if it's people that are in your own household or your own children, that you should try and share the provisions that you've been given. The second section here, and this is the manners that should be observed while you are eating. And the first, of course, is to begin with the name of Allah before you begin, and then to conclude your eating by praising Allah, alhamdulillah. The next thing is to eat with your right hand. This is from the etiquette of Islam. These are good manners. And you take small bites, and you chew well. And you do not go to take more food until you have swallowed what you are eating. Right? So you're not loaded up and ready to go. Okay? The appearance is one of gluttony, right? That you are being excessive when consuming. And then you don't complain about food, right? You shouldn't complain about food. The Prophet ﷺ was noted that he never complained about food. And he never said anything bad about it. Ma'aba, he says, Rasulullah ﷺ ta'amin qat. That he never said anything bad about food. If he liked it, he would eat it, and if he didn't like it, then he would just leave it. It's likely that food someone likes. And if you go tearing it up, oh, that's disgusting, and I can't believe anyone eats that, it's just slimy, it looks like whatever, you may turn somebody off or hurt their feelings, especially if they're the ones that prepared it, or someone prepared it for them. Like your spouse, for example, okay? Like you don't want to go destroying a good thing by complaining about the food, right? It's not prophetic in nature, and it's just probably not a smart thing to do. The next manner is that you eat what is in front of you, right? So you understand that typically as was mentioned here, the setting of mealtime is communal. So either with family or with friends or with relatives or with whoever. And so you're with people and not just isolated for most of the time. So it's considered improper to reach across to get something that's in front of someone else. But you should eat whatever's in front of you unless there's a multitude of things available. You have different varieties like fruit. You have different types of things and they're spread out. Then in that case, then, if you want one type or another, then, that this is an exception here. And then he says eating with 3 fingers. And then also picking up any food that fell. So if you drop something, you can pick it up and eat it. And where I come from, we always have a 5-second rule. Do you guys have a 5-second rule? If you drop it, you get 5 seconds, and it's not considered tainted? Huh?
3 seconds.
3-second rule? Oh. And I will extend the 5-second rule to a 10-second rule if needed. Understand? It's a dorura. It's like just a necessity. So yeah, you should pick it up and not discard it. And you can clean it off or whatever it needs to be done in order to take care of that. The next thing he says is not to blow on food which is hot, but you should patiently wait for it to cool down. You should not, and this is if you're eating dates or anything with seeds or with a rind like fruits, you should not put them on the same plate, right? So you don't spit out your seeds into the plate that has the dates on it, or you don't put the orange seeds back into the same plate with the oranges. You're laughing, but it's not terribly uncommon for those types of things to occur. You don't know where to put it, you just put it back there. Or you peel the rind of something and then you put it back there. So it's like your serving tray has now become the trash can as well. So you can see this could be quite off-putting. And you should not also, he says, hold them both in your hand at the same time. So if you're eating dates, then you don't hold the dates and the date stones in your hand at the same time, but rather you spit them out. And then there's some etiquette to doing that. You spit them out onto the dhahr al-yad, the top part of your hand, and then you discard it. And I'll tell you what the wisdom is in that shortly. He says anything that has a seed or a rind is the same thing. He says you should not drink while eating at the same time, meaning the drink should be consumed at the end. And this is perhaps, he says, even better medically. There are some hadith that refer to this. The grading of the hadith can be investigated. He says the manners of drinking is that you drink from the glass or the pitcher or whatever with your right hand, and that you look at what it is that you're drinking. You look into it to see it. And then you drink in sips. You take sips as opposed to just gulping the whole thing down. It was reported by Ali radiallahu anhu. It was said that you should sip water in small sips and not gulp it straight, because this is it harms the liver. This is a hadith that was reported by a number of collectors, Abd al-Razaq, al-Bayhaqi, he had a couple of collections. Some of the scholars, they talked about the validity of the hadith. It was in question. However, this is something that was felt appropriately acceptable to Ibn al-Jawzi as well as Ibn Qudam. He says you should not drink while standing, and you should drink, if you will, 3 sips at a time, so that you're drinking and you're taking a breath in sets of 3s. It's reported in Sahihain, Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. There's no doubt about this, of course, authenticity. The Prophet ﷺ used to breathe 3 times when he was drinking from a cup, if you will. And what that means is that you don't hold the cup, drink and breathe into the cup, and then drink like that, but you drink and then you remove the cup to catch your breath, and then to drink again, etc. And this brings us to the next category, which is after eating. Some of the manners after eating. It's preferred that after you eat, which of course you should stop before you get full, to lick your fingers if you're eating with your hands, so as not to waste anything. And then to clean the plate or the bowl, so as not to leave anything behind on that. Most of you are familiar with these things. You grew up learning these things. And then to say Alhamdulillah. And there are some du'as that can be said as well to follow that up, to be more complete in these manners. The Prophet ﷺ in a hadith, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with the servant that when he eats food, he thanks Allah and praises him. And when he drinks drink, he praises Allah for that. So this is to conclude it by saying Alhamdulillah. And then of course you wash your hands afterwards to remove any odors or smells or things of that nature. So this is some of the manners regarding eating.